Hey everyone, welcome to our special St. Patrick's Day show. We're starting off with a locker room talk that is Blarney Stone driven. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.
All right, our locker room talk is, of course, always brought to you by our fine sponsors, Hunter and Ginger Harrelson of Beach Ball Properties. The weather's getting a little warmer. If you want to spend St. Patty's Day in style down at the beach, give Hunter and Ginger a call at Beach Ball Properties and go have a ball at the beach. All right, Joe. So today's locker room talk is I was thinking about luck. That's very key in St. Patrick's Day. You think about finding the pot of the gold at the end of the rainbow, kissing the Blarney Stone, all these things that you associate with St. Patrick's Day and luck, four-leaf clovers. I would say that the New Orleans Saints definitely had a four-leaf clover. Tom Benson was rolling around in one of his used cars that he made millions of dollars selling, rubbing a four-leaf clover when a doctor down in Miami, Florida, examined Drew Brees' shoulder from Nick Saban and the Dolphins, and for some unknown reason said that he never thought that Drew Brees could throw a football right again and wasn't going to heal right, and ultimately caused Nick Saban to choose Dante Culpepper instead of Drew Brees. And of course, Drew Brees went to the Saints. We had 15 amazing years, won a Super Bowl. And in fact, this could be a double one, Joe, because I'm sure some Bama fan up in Tuscaloosa was kissing a Blarney Stone himself that day. And little did he know that him doing that would cause this doctor to make an incorrect diagnosis and would not only lead to Drew Brees coming to the Saints, also lead to Nick Saban getting out of the NFL and coming up to Tuscaloosa. So that's a twofer for you.
Yeah, one of the greatest implications ever as far as a 2-for-1. And then also, you look at the Saints' track record of free agency and aptitude when it comes to quarterbacks. They basically had to have somebody fall into their lap with that type of luck.
That's right, Joe. That was your chances of finding a pot of gold based on the way the Saints have been in the free agent market. They got Drew Brees, and that's about all you can say.
Exactly. Well, the first one I have is, this is, of course, the season of March Madness. And I think about that Butler-Duke basketball game in the national championship in 2010. I know Coach K's retiring, but that was a championship, that Duke was very lucky to win. We concentrate from the Butler side of things about how the shot almost went in, but the fact that the shot, was that close to going in, I mean, Duke was really lucky to win that championship.
Yeah, Joe, I remember that shot to this day. I mean, it went off the backboard, and I feel like it hit every part of the rim and was halfway in. And, I mean, it did everything it could except go in. I don't think I've ever seen a shot that was so close to going in that ultimately didn't, especially at such a critical time.
Yeah, and the way the microphone was on the basket, you could hear it so well, like just, hit off the rim.
That's right, Joe. The next one that I have, in this, of course, I'm talking about March Madness, talking about my Auburn Tigers. They got a real four-leaf clover, and Jay Jacobs was kissing some mad Blarney Stones when he got Bruce Pearl fresh off a show cause. In fact, actually, at the very end of his show cause, to agree to be Auburn's head coach. Of course, Bruce Pearl had gotten a 3-year show cause from the NCAA for having a cookout that he never told the NCAA about and lied to them about, which is amazing. You think about that being a 3-year show cause, and then it took the NCAA 3 years to get Will Wade even a notice of allegations. But I digress. He had not been coaching, of course, because he could not. He was working with ESPN, and I was reading an article today. Not only was he working for ESPN, he also was the head of media relations for a Knoxville food distribution company. So he was doing multiple different things. Jay Jacobs approached him, and Bruce Pearl took a long time to decide whether or not he wanted to have the Auburn job. And of course, where Auburn was at basketball at that time, they were so lucky that Bruce Pearl was damaged goods. I mean, frankly, at that point, because they would never have a chance at a coach of that caliber. And because he was in the situation he was in, where in a lot of ways he was not untouchable, but people were shying away from him. He wasn't quite past the show cause yet. Auburn had an AD that saw the writing on the wall and saw that this was a coach who made a mistake, but was someone that was an amazing program builder and someone that they had a chance at getting. And all the things aligned where Auburn was able to secure a coach. And now we're looking 8 years later. We've had a Final Four run. We've had 2 SEC regular season championships, had a tournament championship. Probably would have maybe even had a chance at another tournament championship if they hadn't cut the season short with Isaac Okoro 2 years ago. And now you got a team that was number 1 for about a month this year, a solid, the best number 2 seed by rankings, and someone who has a legitimate chance to win a national championship. And it's all because Auburn got lucky that they got a coach who was on the wrong side of the NCAA, who people were staying away from, and now he's locked in for a lifetime deal. And there's not enough four-leaf clovers in the world to put all these things together. And you know what they say, Joe, that luck is where preparation meets opportunity. And Jay Jacobs took that opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That was definitely a golden opportunity for Auburn, and they've definitely more than capitalized over the last 7 or 8 years with Bruce Pearl. Speaking of luck, though, the next one I'm going to go to, back in 2003, Dan, of course, the Chicago Cubs had their infamous blown game against the Florida Marlins, where they had the series won in Game 6. And then we all know what happened. They lost in 7 games. And it all, is traced back to the fan who reached over into fair territory or foul territory, where the left fielder was trying to catch the ball and interfered. And that allowed the Marlins to come back and sparked a rally to win that game. But what I think people don't concentrate on enough is not necessarily the ineptitude of the Cubs, but the luckiness of the Marlins in order to have that happen with the fan. I mean, what, fluke of nature, could explain that otherwise? And then they go on to not only win that series, but win the World Series.
That's right. You think about a lucky organization, I think in a lot of ways you could compare Auburn football to the Marlins. You feel like it'll go away for a while, and then they have this one year that comes out of nowhere where they win a national championship or get close. I think Auburn's a little bit more consistent than the Marlins, but the Marlins do that. They'll come out of nowhere. They'll be like, projected to be last, not make the playoffs. Then they'll have a year like that where they win it. And it's happened, twice in the last 20 years?
Yes, and they always will win, and then they'll sell all their players, like trade them away. And then lastly, they've won 2 World Series, but they've only been to the playoffs 3 times in their entire existence.
And then 2 of them ended up with World Series victories.
And no division titles.
Well, hey, now that's a lucky percentage right there. Joe, before I go to my one unlucky one, I did want to dovetail on what I was talking about with Bruce Pearl earlier and throw in an added little bit of luck that he had when Auburn made their Final Four run. The first round game, they played New Mexico State, who was a 12 seed, and Auburn played a terrible game. And the very end of the game, they were only winning by 2 points. The New Mexico State guy, I don't think I've ever seen somebody more wide open to have a game-winning shot, and they passed it to him, and I was just like, all right, well, so much for this season, because, Joe, there wasn't a person within 20 feet of him, and the guy airballed the three-pointer. And that's the reason that Auburn was able to get on that run, beat Kansas, beat North Carolina, beat Kentucky, and then make it to the Final Four, was because some random player from the New Mexico State Aggies airballed a wide open 3-pointer to win the game.
It reminds me, I think Butler in 2011, when they made that second run to the championship game, they won the first game against Old Dominion on like a wide open dunk, like at the last second. And so that was definitely one of those big what ifs for Old Dominion.
All right, Joe, going to the unlucky side of things, first off, I guess you could say that later that year, Bruce Pearl got a payback in the Final Four game. They didn't call the double dribble. And of course, there was that phantom foul where I think maybe this part of his finger touched the guy shooting the 3-pointer that gave him those 3 shots. But the big one, and talking about in terms of like the most unlucky person, I think of this coach when I think of someone that needs to actually go to Ireland, bend over backwards and kiss the Blarney Stone. And I'm talking about Mike Gundy. You look at a guy who, in terms of longevity now, there's very few coaches in D1 college football that have been in one school as long as he has been at Oklahoma State. And also, Joe, I mean, I would say that outside of maybe Bill Snyder, he's done more with less than any coach I can ever think of in major D1 college football. And these, of course, would be the coaches that have never won a national championship. Well, Mike Gundy's gotten a lot closer than Bill Snyder has. Bill Snyder had a couple teams that got pretty close, but not like the way that Mike Gundy has. And then you think about a couple instances over the last 10 years where he should have had a team play for the national championship. I'm not going to say they would have won, but I'm talking about he never got there. And you look at 2011, his team was undefeated throughout the entire season. Then they play an Iowa State team that I think was borderline bowl eligible, not a great team. And in fact, I think their head coach was a former Auburn defensive coordinator. And this Iowa State team made like a long last second field goal. It was over 45 yards. I remember that, to beat Oklahoma State, take them away from the ranks of the unbeaten, and give Alabama, yet again, Nick Saban's rubbing that lucky rabbit's foot, from losing to LSU during the regular season to having the chance to come back and beat LSU in the national championship game in a payback, all because Oklahoma State couldn't beat an Iowa State team that was barely bowl eligible on a last second field goal with a kicker that wasn't that good. So that was Mike Gundy's first one. The second one is last season, and it was twice, Joe. First, it happened against Iowa State again in a really great game, but it came down to what I thought was a very poor call. Of course, I like Oklahoma State, but they were driving with a chance to win the game, and the referee said that they were short on a fourth down, which I thought it was the replay clearly showed that Oklahoma State had gotten the first down. I mean, if anybody needed to be throwing bottles on the field, it should have been Oklahoma State fans on that one, because they actually were short on that one. And so they lose to Iowa State. Okay, so I guess they're probably out of it, right? No, they build their way back in. They beat Oklahoma. They go on this run, and they're playing Baylor, and all they got to do to make the 4-team college football playoff is score one time out of 8 from inside the 1-yard line. Baylor, of course, has got a staunch defense. We saw what they did to Ole Miss. But literally 7 times they stop them. And then the last play, this Oklahoma State guy, I mean, I feel like I could have ran faster than this dude, because he had a lane to the goal line where it's like there was no way that he could get stopped. And he, ambles. I would say ambles. I'm not even talking about run, when he goes to the pylon and ends up being maybe this much short. I mean, maybe even more like this from being in the end zone. Baylor wins the Big 12, and yet again, Mike Gundy is unlucky, does not make the national championship, and still has never played in a college football playoff or a national championship game.
It just hit me. I've never thought of this before. Didn't Gene Chizik recruit most of those players in that 2011 Iowa State team?
Yes, he would have. That's very ironic right there. So not only did he win a national championship at Auburn, he would have been responsible for all of the players on that Iowa State team that kept Mike Gundy from making the 2011 national championship.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's one of those things with Mike Gundy, Dan, where you're like, maybe it's just not meant to be. And that's the way I felt as an Ole Miss fan watching Ole Miss against Arkansas over the years, especially that 2015 Ole Miss-Arkansas game. I think that still haunts all of us to this day, because, you don't not only have the 4th and 25, but you just had the back and forth nature of the entire game. Just every touchdown was matched touchdown for touchdown. And then lastly, you still had a chance to win it on that 2-point conversion stop, but then you're flagged for a face mask and you still lose. And so just so many different emotions, and you just felt like, Ole Miss missed out on their best chance to win the West.
Yeah, that has to be one of the most ridiculous football games I've ever seen. 4th and 25, Hunter Henry tosses it backwards, it just bounces on the ground and somehow lands perfectly in the hands of Alex Collins sprinting, gets that first down. And then you're right, the overtime thing was even more brutal, though, because Kim Dichie stops him, 15 yards behind the line of scrimmage and inexplicably grabs his face mask.
Mm-hmm.
That was brutal.
And people were celebrating, not realizing at first a flag was thrown. That because I remember being in the stadium and celebrating, and then it's like, wait, no, there's a flag.
All right. And yeah, so that was unlucky. So Ole Miss, maybe Lane Kiffin and Mike Gundy need to have a date together where they go to Ireland, and maybe they just kiss the Blarney Stone together to collectively solve all these luck issues that Ole Miss and Oklahoma State football are having.
For sure.
All right, when we come back, we're about to bring on Tar Heel Tom, my cousin, who's a big North Carolina fan, who actually is doing March Madness legit, is in Vegas with all of his friends right now for the first couple rounds where they can do some serious Atlanta doctor level betting on all these games. And a real cool little reunion of all of his North Carolina fans. We're going to bring him in just a little bit. I want to thank all of our listeners. You can catch all of our episodes on Spotify. And then, of course, you can watch our videos of our old episodes uploaded the last few months on our YouTube channel. And, of course, you can follow us on Twitter at DJ Sports Show. And as always, I'm Dan.
And I'm Joe.